It's funny because I'm so much more animated when I teach, like in person. Whew. Apparently, a student who saw my class went and spoke to her advisor and said, I have like just the most just passionate teacher. He's like so excited about Haitian history. And that's the best thing I've ever heard. That makes me so happy because it really is something I'm extremely passionate about. Also, maybe you are a Haitian historian who knows more than I do, which is not hard. I do not have an expertise in Haiti. I have not taken okay, I took one graduate level class in Haitian literature, but like I'm not like an expert in Haiti at all. Not at all. Like I have enough ability to communicate information that I think that I can communicate what information I have in a way that is accessible and important and can reach people and can actually maybe 32 students at a time make the world a better place by increasing compassion and critical thinking, especially in terms of the division between the perceived first and third world, right? But like, feel free to correct me in the comments, man. Put on some long ass comments. I love it. Okay, so let's get to class number two. The fun thing is, the class number one I taught yesterday, class number two, I'm teaching tomorrow. So this is actually good. This is going to help me kind of practice. And what were we talking about? Talking about practice. Help me practice what's coming up for tomorrow. All right, so for today's class, we are going to be students and friends. I am Professor Sky. My name is perhaps known to you. I've undertaken to teach about Haiti. I want curiosity and a thirst for complex understanding to reign on YouTube. I am working to help that happen. Unite yourselves, students, and learn with me for the same cause. This is my favorite bit of the reading here. Haiti disturbs. Sociologist Jean Casimir likes to say. He's down at Duke, one of the great Haitian scholars of all time. It disturbs, of course, because of its poverty and its suffering, but it also disturbs because throughout its history, Haiti's people have repeatedly turned away from social and political institutions designed to achieve profits and economic growth, choosing to maintain their autonomy instead. Have some fun thinking about that, because as you think about that, you realize why has Haiti been so consistently punished by the rest of the world? Maybe it's because they don't actually want economic growth. Maybe what they want is autonomy, and then maybe constantly, their autonomy is taken away from them by international bodies who think they know better. There might be a lesson in there. So today, what did my students know about Haiti? What happened before 1492 when Columbus sailed somewhere? What happened in 1492? What happened after? Talk about Spanish Hispaniola, and of course, we'll get to some pirates and homework for Friday. So, what did my students know about Haiti? Let's go through it. Nothing. Current state, not good. First free Caribbean country. Many Haitians in Miami. Compa music. Hey, that's pretty good. It's a country. Professor Sky is passionate about it. It's a French speaking island. Kind of true. Lower level country. Don't like that terminology, but that's part of why the students are learning that. Like, that's an interesting thing that someone said anonymously, okay? But it's an interesting thing to say. Struggled economically, it's in the South, something to do with the French, world wars, revolutions, being a big part of freeing Venezuela. That's interesting. Role models on how to bring people together, some sort of revolution, fighting back during slave times, nothing. Different version of the alphabet, mountains, wars, third world country, another questionable term, slavery, revolt, poverty, rich culture in the Caribbean, republic, France is related, South America, speak Creole, colonized by French, sharing with DR, first Black Republic in 1804. Honestly, I know little. It's a small country. I don't know anything. Ooh, someone knows the Independence Day. Some food is griot. 2013 had a bad hurricane. Interesting. Connected to DR. Okay. Interestingly enough, I shared all the responses from my students 7 years ago. Had a revolution, colony, earthquake, Belgium, nope, nothing, absolutely nothing. Earthquake disaster, blame for AIDS, earthquake, revolution. Next to DR, they speak French, French colony, earthquake, enslaved, earthquakes, hot impoverished, earthquake, Caribbean, complicated. I just show all of that just to show you that, like, the general knowledge of Haiti was, for the most part, exclusively limited to the fact that there was an earthquake. That's because my students 7 years ago, were in elementary school when the earthquake happened in 2010. Now my students were like 2 or 3 years old. So they just don't know. Like, one of the greatest humanitarian disasters of this century, and not even that is on the radar. Okay. So I tell you, my classes, this would be a point in my class where I would have my students sort of talk about what they know and I would take attendance, right? I would just do that. Um, and then in class, I'm just gonna have my students say "hoo hoo" every time there's an unintended consequence, because the story of Haiti is often a story of unintended consequences. Okay, what happened before 1492? There's probably a bunch of dinosaurs. All right, beyond the dinosaurs, a lot of other stuff happened. I think it's worth pointing out to students because I definitely was not super cognizant of how this stuff all worked. But this is actually human migration. Obviously we all came out of Africa, what, 200 to 130,000 years ago. We're down, we're down there. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Down there, we sort of start to kind of move around a little bit, start to kind of go around, start to kind of like travel around like the little black line here, 90 to 55,000 miles years ago. That's where we really started to kind of branch out, keep branching out all these thousands of years ago, all these thousands of years ago, all the people just start spreading all over the earth, coming from Africa and going everywhere, which leads us to Haiti, which is right there between 10 and 1,000 years ago. Okay. Well, more than 1,000 years ago, we know that. Okay. But people moved from South America, okay, from the northern part of South America to these islands. That's what happened. They were called the Taíno. Okay. Taino. There's not many of them left for reasons which we will study, but this was where they lived. This was their home. This area right here is where the Taino lived. They had five kingdoms. This is the island of Hispaniola. Okay, so just so you understand, this is what Haiti and the Dominican Republic look like now. That's the island of Hispaniola. Okay, so together these two islands are what make the island of Hispaniola. The western half is Haiti. The eastern half is Dominican Republic. One was colonized by Spain. The other was colonized by France. You're going to learn all about that stuff if you keep watching, everybody, or keep learning. So this was what it looked like. These were just different kingdoms, but actually chiefdoms run by caciques. I don't know how you pronounce that, but that's where they all were. That's how they were all divided up. Okay, this is before Columbus arrived, before anyone arrived on any boats. Okay, and they would sometimes refer to it as Haiti, land of high mountains. That's in the Taino language. Haiti is not French, it's not even Creole, it is from the native language, land of high mountains. Let's just take 1 second, shall we, to just think a little bit about the Taino people who were there before. A chief has a throne, okay? And wait, I wrote it down here, so I can't see. A cacique has a duho. A cacique is a chief of the Taino. This is a duho from the 13th to 15th century, way, before Columbus arrived. These chairs, these thrones, were half human, half animal. It's considered to be an access to a parallel world. So they are spiritual places for a chief to be. The cacique sits down, links to a semi, a spirit, or an ancestor. Like the chair has like a soul. That's how they perceive it. So when you go to a museum and you see one of these, the people who made this believed that it had a soul. We'll talk more about furnitures with soul later on in the class. It has male genitals. See, look. Oh, can you even see? It's got little testicles down there. Isn't that silly that they did that? I mean, we would never do that. There you go. Some truck nuts there for you. Very much 21st century. So that's how the cacique would sit down on the throne, and he would sit on there and do snort psychedelic cahoba snuff. Okay, so that would help him to go on his mystical journey through mind-altering drugs. Okay, it would be made with some gold. Uh-oh. Anytime you're studying the history of the world and you see the word gold, somebody is about to get invaded and robbed and die. Okay? Some gold. There was no gold on that throne. Who knows how history would have gone? But there was. And do you know who the most famous person to sit on a duho that had gold on it? Do you know the name of the person to do it? His name was Christopher Columbus. Woohoo! Unintended consequences of letting Christopher Columbus sit on a chair with some gold on it. Here is a fanciful recreation of the cacique meeting. This is a very, very colonialist image, okay? But we have over here on the left with this big old cross, Christopher Columbus, and then who is The first great unambiguous hero of history. Part one, Christopher Columbus. I'm just kidding. These are quite ambiguous figures of history, Christopher Columbus, because there are no unambiguous heroes in this world. And then we have, I don't know how to say his name, but Guacanagarix, who was the cacique that met Columbus when Columbus arrived. Most Americans don't know that when Columbus arrived in the Americas, he didn't land on Plymouth Rock. He didn't land in Virginia. He landed in the Bahamas. And then he went around the Caribbean for a bit. And eventually he ended up on what is now called Haiti, okay, back in 1492. And what did he say about these Taíno that he met? Well, what he said was very fascinating. I'm including the link down there because I've seen different versions of what he said in his letters back to the king. So they all say basically the same thing, but I've seen the wording in different places. So this is where I found this wording. All right. So again, if you're a Haitian historian who's checking me for facts, you can feel free to tell me because I can't quite get the answer here. He's talking about the Taino. They traded with us and gave us everything they had with good will. They took great delight in pleasing us. They are very gentle and without knowledge of what is evil, nor do they murder or steal. Your Highness may believe that in all the world there can be no better people. They love their neighbors as themselves, and they have the sweetest talk in the world, and are gentle and always laughing. He then went on to say, you know what? They straight up gave me a gold crown and let me sit on a seat with gold on it. But you know what? I say we leave them alone. I mean, these folks, they're so sweet. I say we just leave them alone forever. Class over. All right. This is our turning point right here. Christopher Columbus discovers these people, and instead of saying, I think we're good, I think we're good, he doesn't say these people are so nice. He says, I think I can convert them to Christianity. I think they can give us what we need. He immediately starts exploiting them and trying to figure out where the rest of that gold came from. All right? That's what happened. That's the sad truth. He did not say these things. He did not say, I think we should leave him alone. He referred to the Taino as property of the Spanish crown. He already thought of them as property. Okay? In 1492, the near Le Cap today in Haiti, the Santa Maria gets wrecked. Like, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, one of those three ships has a shipwreck right there in what is now called Haiti. So Columbus thinks about what to do. There it is. It's all the way up there in current day Haiti. He's like, hey, I am going to leave 39 people here. Okay. I don't know where I got this image from. And the Taino chief says, okay, but what happens? What happens to the 39 people? Ooh, 1 year later, there's no people. What happened? Okay, that's the question. What happened? We don't know. Frankly, if I were a maker of prestige horror movies, I would do a horror movie about this. I would do a horror movie about this scene. You can take this idea, but you give me, say like thanks to Professor Sky for coming up with this idea. But a horror movie, right? One second, okay. A horror movie, right? That's about these 39 people who are left behind. Okay. And it should be that they are like killed, but not by the people there, but by like some kind of mysterious force that represents some kind of avenging colonized ghostliness, that like maybe even they're trying to be helped by the people, but like ultimately they can't get away from the terribleness of the thing that they're doing. There's totally a horror movie here because we have no idea what happened to these 39 people. There's a bunch of things that could have happened. They could have slaughtered each other over gold. Okay. They could have been slaughtered by the Taino. They could have been slaughtered by the Carib, different tribe. Okay, they're down there. All right, it's entirely possible. We don't know, but they don't care in Spain. They don't care. They just want the gold. They love gold. That's what they love. That's what Spain wants. That's what they want more than anything. They go over, they don't think about anything but gold. Just gold, 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 gold. How do we get gold? How do we get gold? It doesn't matter what happens. We need to get gold. So they come up with what is called the encomienda system. Okay? Wait, did I spell that right on the slide? Wait a minute. I don't think I spelled that right on the slide. Did I? One second. Let me pause the recording here. What do you know? I did spell it right. Good for me. I think because I don't speak Spanish too well. I thought it was economienda, but no, it's a encomienda system, which is a pretty simple system. Okay, any Spaniard who takes control and lives on a colonial land has the right to forced labor from the native population who are given to them by the Spanish crown. So the way that it works is you go to your neighbor's house, you say it's your house, and then you make them make you food and make stuff to sell at the market. And in return, they get to be owned by you. In theory, their souls are being saved by Christianity, but whatever. Religion is usually just a justification for abuse of power. All right, so that's the system. So they show up and they basically virtually enslave all the natives and just say, all right, well, hey, we give you Christianity and we'll protect you. You were doing just fine on your own, but we'll protect you. It would be a real shame if something bad happened and forced all these people to work. Okay? These laborers are not paid, but they are taught Spanish and about Jesus. So, deal. From 1492 to 1514, the population of the Taíno went from 750,000 to 15,000. Okay, why? Well, you know the reason why. Smallpox, murder, R word, typhoid. I mean, I'm not even monitoring this thing, but I just don't say that word on the internet. Typhoid, slavery, all that stuff, all those things just led to that massive death. If you can just imagine that quantity of people dying in that short period of time, that's what happened after Columbus arrived. Okay? So what remains of the Taino? Well, not much. There's not many Taino left, unfortunately. But they did give us some words that we use every day. So anytime you're in a canoe, you can thank a Taino. Anytime you think about tobacco, you can thank a Taino. Anytime there's a hurricane, that's their word too. And a hammock. Some pretty good words right there. So if you take a canoe to a hammock to have a cigarette during a hurricane, you're doing all of that in Taino. But this is what happened. There's not that much gold in Haiti. And the Spanish crown is unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you think, not particularly interested in anything but gold. They, as I said previously, love gold. So they leave. Spanish Empire leaves Hispaniola, that whole island where is now Dominican Republic, and Haiti. They just leave. They don't care about it anymore. Just it doesn't mean they leave a couple people there, but no one really. And they just go over to South America and start plundering South America because they might find gold there. All right. By the mid 16th century, so within like 15 years, within 50 years of Columbus showing up, it is, as said in the podcast, a complete colonial backwater inhabited only by farmers. That's what it is. By little pigs like this and little cows like that. Woo-hoo, unintended consequences. Because cows and pigs are not native. They're not native to this part of the world. So they're brought there. It was actually this pig in particular. This pig right here, the Creole pig, is one of the most important characters in the entire history of Haiti. We're going to be studying a lot about this pig and why this pig is not around anymore and why this pig got there is the first thing. On Columbus's second trip to Haiti, 1 year later, he brought some pigs. And that completely changed all of the economy going forward for this little plot of land. All right. So, little unintended consequence. All of a sudden, this land, which, people were living on the coast, but there wasn't much to do inland, they all of a sudden now were able to be agricultural, but there aren't many people there. And then we start realizing, or people start realizing, that this is actually not a bad spot if you want to be a pirate, a privateer, who are sailors with permission from the French and the British crown to steal the Spaniards' gold. So the Spaniards are over in South America. They're killing everything that moves. They're trying to get as much gold as they can possibly get, and they put it on ships. And then there's people who want to steal that, and they get supported and bankrolled by the by the French and British uh, government, you know, by the monarchies. It's just the way it was. It's just the way it was. It's wild. Okay. No wonder we had a couple world wars, so they go out, they run the jewels, they get all the gold, and they take it. And in particular, they would be out of this little island. Here, let me get to another sorry, that's a dumb slide. Wait, how do I get to where's like a better map? Yeah. Yeah. So you can see like this little island right here was a really perfect spot to set out because often people would be leaving through there or up around there, and it was a good base of operations. Okay. So that little base of operations is by the mid 1620s known as Tortuga, which means turtle because it looks like a turtle, right? You've heard of the island of Tortuga because you've watched Pirates of the Caribbean. The one good movie, the one great movie, and then the rest that are just unwatchable. At least that's my memory. Okay? This is where we get things like Buccaneers. You remember? Do you remember that they introduced cows onto the islands? Well, the thing is when you're on a ship, right? When you're like on a boat for a long period of time, you can't have like steak, right? You can't have like hamburgers because that's going to go bad. So what they do is they dry out the meat. They dry it out and they season it so that it can stay for a long time. There happens to be a Taíno word for that, it's bucan. So the people who eat bucan are buccaneers. So that's why they're called buccaneers, because they were eating the cow, dried out cow that was imported there uh, by Columbus 50 years previous. Okay, they were also called the Brethren of the Coast, and they're also just called pirates. But then things get interesting because at this point, Tortuga, most of the pirates, most of the privateers, excuse me, most of the privateers are French, and they're realizing they're not fully protected. They could they get a governor out here? Could you send, hey, Louis the 14th, could you send a bunch of guys out here and like a leader so that we can actually be a part of France right now? 400 more colonists arrive. So we have 6,000 colonists in 1680. And this is maybe the biggest unintended consequence. Because what does that mean now? If France has a royal governor somewhere, that makes it what? This is where I would take a second. I would ask my students, I'd say, what does that make this land? Who does it belong to? Is it a part of the Spanish Empire? No, there's a French royal governor. Now it's a part of the French Empire. Now, the nice thing is, or the bad thing is, I don't know, depending on how history would have planned out, Spain doesn't care because there's no gold there. So what are they going to do with all that stuff? Nothing. So all of a sudden now France has a foothold in this little island that was discovered by Christopher Columbus, this little island that nobody cared about. All right? And then we have the 9 Years' War that actually lasted 9 years. Good job, world, in having a war that lasts as long as you say it does. Man, the 100 Years' War is like 116 years. Anyways, this was what that war looked like. We're not going to get too into it, but just to give you an idea, Louis XIV made France the most powerful country in the world. And you can tell by what it took to have a tie game. Okay, this war lasted for 9 years. It was not particularly consequential, except in one way. There's one big change that happened, but for the most part, it was just a huge loss of life and money. But that's how powerful France was. The Dutch Republic, England, Scotland, Holy Roman Empire, Spanish Empire, and the Savoyard state had to all gang up together, and all they could do was get a tie game. Okay, a null match. There was one important thing that changed, though. The most consequential thing that changed was at the Treaty of Ryswick that ends the 9 Years' War. At that treaty, ta-da, it's yours, France. You can take this part. You can take this part of Hispaniola. Okay? You can take this little part. This is part of France now. This little part that we called Santo Domingo, you now get to call Saint-Domingue. All right, it's no longer called Haiti. It's no longer just called Hispaniola. It is now called Saint-Domingue. And thus begins the French era in, I did not spell the slide right, Haiti. Not hi. But let's go back for a second. Let's go back for a second because we're getting somewhere here. Okay. Let's have another great unambiguous hero of history, part two, Bartolome de las Casas. Okay. Important thinker and writer, right? And he arrives in 1502, and he has some slaves, or, he's doing the system. But he's an interesting guy. He has a change of heart. He benefits from this terrible system, but then he says, this is not right. These are his words. It is not possible to recount a hundredth part of what I have seen with my own eyes. A man need to have a body of iron to undergo the labor they endure in getting gold out of the mines. They must delve and search 100 times over in the inner parts of the mountains till they dig down from top to bottom. They must work the very rocks hollow. And he, Bartolomeo de las Casas, helped to put an end to slavery, cruelty, and inhuman treatment of the indigenous people. Hold your applause. You want to clap because this is really good. He's telling people what it's like, what Spain's actually doing, virtually enslaving all of these people. They just land to just show up, and all of a sudden they're working for him. Okay? I told you to hold your applause. Let me tell you why. He wrote this whole narrative. He explained the whole thing, how it worked. He said, enslaving natives is wrong. Try Africans instead. Ooh. All right. This is some bad stuff. So, what this did was it helped to racialize slavery. Remember that slavery wasn't really racialized, it was just a question of power. It was just like who had power over whom, right? That was it. So, once slavery can be racialized, once you can say that African people, people of this color skin, are the people who deserve to be enslaved, then you have to create some kind of system behind it. You have to create some kind of ethos and belief system to back up that idea. That's racism. That's the invention of racism. You needed racism to justify this idea of getting all this free labor. You needed to invent it. It didn't exist. People just weren't thinking about it. I mean, it's not like everything was kumbaya and everybody loved each other, but you go to the 1300s and you ask a French person what they think of an African, they'll be like, I've never seen an African. My great grandkids will never see an African. I don't know. They don't think something, like this whole globalizing force of slavery, super spooky, scary, terrible stuff that's happening. And a lot of it we can see right here. Why is Haiti the most important country in the world? Because look at all the things that are playing out. Look at the invention of racism, promulgation of slavery, the shifting back and forth between all of these countries and all of these global superpowers, all of these things happening. So he is quite ambiguous figure of history, Ptolemy Casas. Here's an image of what it looked like. This is a good example of what slavery looked like at the time. We see the way it was depicted and how it was seen to be as something natural. To be fair, he didn't like it. After he encouraged this to happen, by the end of his life, he said, we shouldn't do this either. But this is the problem, okay? This is the problem. This is from the reading that you did too. If you did the reading instead of the podcast, this is something that you read. French Saint-Domingue grew to become the most profitable colony in the world. By the late 18th century, it was the world's largest producer of sugar, exporting more of it than the colonies of Jamaica, Cuba, and Brazil combined. At the same time, Saint-Domingue also grew fully half of the world's coffee. It was a small territory covering only 10,600 miles, about the size of Massachusetts. Yet it was more valuable to France than all 13 colonies of North America were to England. Yeah, bro. I understand you don't think it's a good idea, but once that money started flowing, once the terrible machine of triangular slave trade started working, it became a faucet that no one was willing to turn off. That's what happened. And that's where the class is really going to get started on Friday. So, anyways, if you're following along at home, get Black Jacobins, read pages 16 to 30. Okay, I'm actually having my students do both of these things. They have to write questions. Feel free to put in the comments what questions did you write. If you're doing this class on your own, you tell me what class what did you write? Okay, and then you have to finish listening to the first episode of the Revolutions podcast. Okay, because now we're gonna get to some interesting stuff here. Really, really interesting, really, really scary stuff. All right. Well, then, I think that's it. Tell me if you like this. I don't check the comments too frequently on my spam channel, so I hope this does well. I hope this is meaningful to people. We're gonna be going over a lot of stuff. We're gonna be going right up to 2025 in this class. All right. All right. Cool. Then in that case, how am I gonna end this? I guess I'll try and find the camera. Why not?